Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jill Nogueras, and I'm the English coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education, and I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon so that we can explore the platform of Understand Scoring. I do have several colleagues on the line with me today. Catherine Ringley from the Office of Student Assessment will be supporting a lot of this webinar this afternoon as we look at Understand Scoring from the assessment side, and Carmen Curick will be supporting from the English instruction side. Along with those two, I have Colleen Cassida, who will be supporting instruction questions, and Holly Cook from the Office of Student Assessment, who will be answering assessment questions if any of those come up in the chat. Just to remind you, we are going to use the chat feature to submit questions. If you could, from that drop-down menu, switch from all panelists to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your question and everyone can see the answer. Today's presentation is being recorded, and so we will be posting the webinar and the support materials on the Comprehensive Literacy Webinar Series webpage after this event. So everything will be recorded, and you will receive the PowerPoint presentation on that site. Just want to spend a few minutes going over our agenda. I know a lot of you probably saw when you first logged in that we're talking about 5th grade local alternative assessments for 5th grade writing. Understand Scoring is a platform that is used for 5th grade writing, 8th grade writing, end of course writing, and local performance assessments for high school verified credit. So while we are going to use 5th grade examples today to kind of walk you through how Understand Scoring works, the samples are going to be available that cover 8th grade, high school end of course, and local performance assessments as well. So all of the pieces are there, but we are going to walk through it through the lens of 5th grade writing because we just updated the material to align the 5th grade writing samples with the 2017 English Standards of Learning. So again, we are going to model through the 5th grade pieces, but everything that we talk about today applies, you know, in 8th grade in terms of having anchor sets and annotations and being able to practice scoring and all of that. But the screenshots that you see today will have to do with 5th grade writing, just to have some sort of visual and image for you to see as we're moving through. But this is a global presentation and it is supporting 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school writing. So we're going to talk today about what is Understand Scoring. While it is a platform that has been around for 20 plus years, we do have new teachers each year. So we're excited to kind of walk you through what that is, how to access Understand Scoring, and then how to use it, whether that's for local alternative assessments or practice leading up to one of the 8th grade or high school SOL writing assessments, or in preparation of a local performance assessment to verify credit in writing. So other ways that you can use Understand Scoring. And while these applications that I'm talking about have to do with 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school, that does not mean that other teachers could not use or access Understand Scoring for some of those additional uses. So a 6th grade teacher could certainly use the material that's in there. A 9th grade teacher could certainly use the material that's in there, but we do have specific materials that align with those 3 grade levels because of the writing assessments tied to each. And then we're just going to close out with a couple of upcoming opportunities before we finish up today. So just first want to say that Understand Scoring is an online application that it's hosted by the Virginia Department of Education and Pearson. So Pearson is our partner in this. So actually when you go to Understand Scoring, you can access it from the Department of Education site, but it does take you out to a new site that is held by Pearson. And it was originally created to provide information about scoring, the short paper component of that 5th grade, 8th grade, and end of course writing standards of learning assessments. And since then, we have modified it to adjust how we have changed things over the last few years. So our supports have changed to go with it. So I'm going to turn this over at this point to Catherine and Carmen. I'm not sure actually who is going to speak first, but to talk about some of the changes and how you can use this moving forward.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're hoping to provide you with some useful information. So first, what has changed for Understand Scoring is that in fall 2020, that tab was updated to include information about local alternative assessment in writing. As you know, the grade 5 writing SOL test was replaced, and so that information specific to the SOL test has been removed. First, we want to walk you through accessing Understand Scoring so that you're able to locate the application a little bit more easily on our website. So you can find the link to places on our website. We link them both and show them both to you today because one link is located under the heading Local Performance Assessments to verify credits in writing, and that's for our end of course writing, but the link is available there, and that's underneath that table for the 2020 standards that I'm sure everyone's very familiar with. And the second location is going to be on our performance assessments and local alternative assessments page, and you'll see the red arrow pointing to the Understand Scoring link there as well. So in order to get started with Understand Scoring, you're going to click that link and go to the sign-in page where you're going to enter your email and your password. On the next slide, you'll see that first you're going to have to click sign up unless you have already logged in this year since, I want to say, July. If you've logged in this year since July, you will have your email and password, but if you have not, you're going to have to sign up again. So if you were using Understand Scoring last spring, those accounts have all been reset, and that's to accommodate our users who need to requalify to score end of course performance assessments. Oh, one thing I forgot to note that you can, is on the slide, but you can access Understand Scoring as a guest at any point, but you will not be able to save your work. When you click sign up, it's going to prompt you with a window to enter a keyword, and that is Virginia. Once you enter your keyword, you'll then you'll enter your username, and password, and then you'll come to this landing page. And from there, if you're going to select grade 5 writing, you'll see the arrow pointing to the button, but as Jill discussed earlier, we have a button for also the grade 8 SOL test, the still available end of course SOL test, and the local high school performance assessment for verifying credit. Some materials that are available to you within Understand Scoring are the rubrics used for scoring, local alternative assessments for grade 5 writing, and anchor papers that illustrate each score point of each domain. You'll recall we have the 2 domains, composing, written expression, and then usage and mechanics. And for those anchor papers, we're also going to have annotations for each, and those annotations are their descriptions and provide explanations of why the student received the score point that it did. And then you're also going to see overlays highlighting information from the annotations. And we'll have a screenshot of that later on. We also have provided practice sets so that you can experience scoring papers. These are written by Virginia students. And again, with those practice papers, you'll see an annotation. And those are only going to be available to you after you've completed the set. So you'll practice scoring, then you can go back and view the annotations. And then there are also verification sets, and those are used mostly to ensure that the scores assigned are consistent with the performance expectations established by the scoring rubrics. And your division may choose to use the verification set scores to qualify readers for scoring the local alternative assessment for grade 5 writing. It's a requirement for the end of course performance assessment for verifying credits, and it is the best practice to use those verification sets to make sure that the rubrics are being properly applied by your scorers. Some more best practice for scoring. Divisions have the authority to choose how they're going to train and qualify their scores for the local alternative assessment. Again, that's different than the performance assessment for high school. You have a little more flexibility in your division for grade 5 writing, but we ask that you consider the information provided in the procedures for training scores and scoring section of the local high school landing page and Understand Scoring. So again, when you get to that first opening page, if you were to select local high school, you can read some of the best practices we're getting ready to share with you more in depth under that heading. Some more best practice. Scorers should read and understand all the information in the grade 5 tab within Understand Scoring. Also read and understand the scoring rubric for the composing written expression domain and each of the composing written expression anchor papers and annotations, and then the scoring rubric for the usage and mechanics domain and each of the usage and mechanics anchor papers and annotations. Before viewing the anchor papers or attempting the practice sets, it's very important to read and understand the information included in the Learn About Scoring section. It should answer a lot of questions you may have. That information is going to be pretty consistent across grade levels, but grade 5 is going to have some specific information for grade 5, and local high school will have some specific information to the performance assessment. We really hope that you will take some time to read the information that's contained in the critical information section. It's going to give you a closer look at some details related to administering and scoring the local alternative assessment in writing. And I think at this point, at this point, I think Carmen is going to discuss some more information about scoring.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So the next section, when you're looking at that Learn About Scoring section on the Understand Scoring website, and you can see the little screenshot of the webpage here, that after critical information is what is focused holistic scoring. So we're going to talk a little bit about focused holistic scoring for a minute, but when teachers and people in your division are scoring papers using the scoring rubric that is located in the Understand Scoring website, teachers will practice scoring papers for the 5th grade local alternative assessment in a focused, holistic way. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. And then this information, like I mentioned before, is also on the Understand Scoring website. So if you ever need to go back and kind of look at that again. But focused holistic scoring is using a set of domains or pre-identified elements and scoring based on the reader's overall impression according to those features of the domain. So in Virginia, like Catherine mentioned before, we use the domains of composing and written expression and then usage and mechanics. So the reader will read the paper and then look at and weigh the student's strengths and weaknesses in the paper and then assign a score that most accurately reflects the overall attributes of that paper. So we're going to look at an example of kind of what that means next. So here's an example of what it means to kind of make an overall impression. So you see a little example, a little screenshot of a student paper here on the right side of the screen. And you can see how there are, this is a screenshot that shows some overlays with notes. But you can see that this paper was assigned a score point of a 3. But as you can see in the little notes and the overlays there, that there are some characteristics of a 2 in this paper and that there are some characteristics of a 4 for composing written expression. So, but overall, the overall impression of this paper is a 3. So you can see how you need to take into account the student's strengths and the student's weaknesses and be able to score an overall point. So next, we wanted to point out one specific example on the Understand Scoring website that you may want to take a look at no matter what grade you are in, but it is placed in the 5th grade practice set. And we wanted to talk a little bit about non-scorable papers and then share this example with you. But all papers, no matter how brief, must be scored unless they are extremely off-topic, incoherent, or in a language other than English. So papers that express a student's refusal to respond are also considered non-scorable. And readers should only score what was written by the student. So written means that the student has appropriately attempted to embed and cite research from outside sources. So before, during, and after scoring papers, it is the local division's decision on how to handle intentional and unintentional plagiarism. And then based on guidance from the Virginia Department of Education, when assigning a score point, the reader should evaluate only the student's work and not information that has been plagiarized. So we have an example. There is an example in the Understand Scoring website. It's the 5th grade practice set 5, paper 3. And in its annotation, it'll share that information with you. It's an example of plagiarized information that would not be considered when scoring. So please go take a look at that when kind of debriefing this information with your division and going through that and getting trained in the Understand Scoring pieces. It's important to kind of think about that as you encounter students with the same example. So we have included a couple frequently asked questions here as a little list to help you as you begin to score papers in your division and begin this training in the Understand Scoring website. So the first one is, should a writing sample lose a point if it includes a digression and it does not have 5 paragraphs? So then you can see the answer there is no. The score should reflect the reader's overall impression based on the rubric. So the rubric, even for score point 4, says few, if any, digressions. So it does leave some wiggle room for that overall impression. And then that the rubric does not mention formulaic writing. So instructionally, we want to teach students the craft of writing, and that writing has a purpose and conveys a message, and that not necessarily happens in 5 paragraphs. And that the rubric does not mention that as well. So then the next question we have here is, should a writing sample gain a point if there are quotation marks, 1 question mark, and 1 exclamation point, regardless of appropriate use, and there are 5 paragraphs? So the answer is no. The score should again reflect the overall impression. The rubric does not kind of talk about tallying the amount of times the student used a variety of punctuation marks in order to give them a higher score. It's kind of that overall impression of the strengths and considering the strengths and weaknesses in their writing. And again, the rubric does not mention formulaic writing. So now we will talk a little bit about the difference between kind of grading and preferences, a teacher's preference in scoring grading versus a rubric. So papers must be scored holistically, not graded. So an educator's classroom preferences and rules for writing, if not included in the Virginia writing rubrics, are not features to score. So we know teachers are frequently grading papers and pieces of writing in their classrooms for specific classroom or division criteria or teacher preferences. But when scoring using the Virginia rubric, it is important to look at that and score holistically. And you can see an example of this before. So the example from the rubric says, uses highly specific word choice, descriptive language, and selected information, creating an appropriate tone, enhancing the writer's voice. And this is in the composing and written expression domain. So, and for example, a teacher's preference might be no second person pronouns. So that is not mentioned in the Virginia scoring rubric. So just something to think about as your teachers are training and being developed and understand scoring so that they know the difference between the two. So this is, it is important for local scores to understand the criteria when assigning a score point, and not to expect papers at a certain score point always look the same or have the same attributes. So there are a large range of different kinds of papers, maybe that score to 2 or score to 4, and that not everyone will look the same. So you can think about, in a division, we often score that an A is a 91 to a 100 or similar. But that A in those scores can look very different. You can have a student with a 92 and a student with a 99, and they look very different. You can have 2 students that get the grade of 99, and those also look very different. So while grading and scoring are not the same things, this is kind of something that is similar between the two. So when you're in Understand Scoring and looking through those anchor papers, it is important to notice the differences between all of the papers within one score point. So when looking at the 3s and when looking at the 4s, looking at that wide range. So because there are a range of papers with each score point, it is important to use those anchor papers and the rubrics together when scoring student writings, to be able to kind of not only look at the language and the criteria in the rubric, but also to kind of look back at the anchors to be able to say which anchor is this most like, to help kind of clear any misconceptions or clear any kind of undecisiveness up when scoring those student papers. So using rubrics and anchor paper sets. So generally rubrics for writing assessments are fairly generic and provide, this is very similar to what I was just mentioning, but provide that general description of a score point, while anchor papers provide examples of student writings that look like that score point. So it is only in conjunction with anchor papers that criteria at each score point of the rubric begin to be clarified. So using the two together in scoring those 5th grade local assessment papers, and using that focused holistic scoring process with any paper, using those two together will be very important to kind of calibrate the scoring process across your division. And then revisiting those anchor papers often, even after qualifying to become a scorer, will help ensure that the scores remain tied to the performance expectations in each domain, no matter how many times you've read them. Kind of going back to the Understand Scoring website, always having access to those anchor papers to be able to kind of go back and say, well, which one does that look most like? Or I've seen that one before. Anything like that that will help kind of clear up any scoring issues that may happen. So now I'm going to turn it over to Catherine. Oh, no, I believe this is still me for just one more second. So each paper, so we're going to talk a little bit about the annotation. So each anchor paper is accompanied by an annotation that describes how the paper meets the expectation outlined in the rubric for the score point. And the annotations that you will find in Understand Scoring were developed using feedback from Virginia teachers and other educators serving on the 2012 and 2020 Rangefinding committees. They played a critical role in helping to develop the feedback and those annotations that go alongside the paper. So we'll show you an example of what that looks like. So again, on the right side, you can see the example student paper there. And after kind of reviewing that paper, there will be an option to access the annotations and overlays to see what the notes in the annotations are there for that paper. And so it uses specific language from the scoring rubric, and in both the overlays and the annotations has specific examples from the student writing. Now, Catherine will talk a little bit about Rangefinding.
So we held a Rangefinding committee this spring, I believe, for 5th grade writing. But what happens with Rangefinding is we get together a committee of Virginia educators who have experience in teaching and scoring student writing. And then they sit down and they look at papers written by Virginia students. And, well, first they look at the writing rubrics and our previous anchor sets. And then they're going to read and assign scores to the new writing samples completed by Virginia students. After they assign those scores, they'll go back to the stack of 4 papers and evaluate, is this a high 4 or a low 4? Is this a high 3 or a low 3, etc. That's kind of how the process works for Rangefinding. We wanted to take a minute to point out that if you are a paper person, the print option is available for you for all anchor, practice, and verification papers for scores. This is specific to 5th grade and potentially 8th grade. The local high school button will not have the verification papers available to print because those are required, again, for scores to complete in a certain manner in order to qualify to score those papers. But for 5th grade writing, you should be able to print any anchor, practice, or verification paper through this print option. After training, prospective scorers should independently score the papers within the 4 available practice sets, and that's going to be best practice to go ahead and review those and practice independently. For each paper in that set, you will assign 1 score for composing written expression and 1 score for usage and mechanics. When you are scoring the practice set and you get your scores back, we'll show you a table on the next slide or so. But if you have assigned, an adjacent score, that means the score was within 1 point of the actual assigned score. So, for example, a practice set paper with a score 0.3 in usage and mechanics, a low adjacent score would be if you gave that paper a 2. And a high adjacent score would be if you gave that paper a 4 when its actual score is a 3. And non-adjacent scores are going to be more than 1 point off. So for example, if that practice paper had a score 0.3 in usage and mechanics and you assigned it a 1, that would be a non-adjacent score. You will be able to view the scoring summary after you've completed the practice sets, and you might use these results to adjust your practice as necessary. So you'll see the results here. You only have 20% exact agreement and scores, 25% are adjacent, and 50% are non-adjacent. So it's pretty far off. And on the next slide, I will point out what I just said. I apologize for that. So I think we could go ahead and skip this one, but the arrows mark out those exact and adjacent columns. In this example, 50% of the scores were non-adjacent, and again, that means the score point was more than 1 point away from the actual score. And those scores that were adjacent, so within 1 score point, they were low. So it's recommended that for this score, they might think about reviewing the practice set annotations, first of all, to understand better why each score point was assigned to that paper, and then go back and review the anchor sets and annotations again with these results in mind before attempting the next practice set. So I might say, wow, I'm really assigning low scores. When I go back and look at what I gave the practice set and what the actual score was, I see that my scoring is consistently too low. So I need to adjust my practice because, again, as we pointed out earlier, it's not always about our preferences. It's what aligns with the rubric that has been established for Virginia use. If you want to review the practice sets, this is an example of what it's going to look like. You have to submit your practice set, and then you have to select that set again from the drop-down menu. If you want to see what score was actually assigned, and then the annotation that explains that score point. So you'll see again in this example, the score assigned by the score was a 1, but the actual paper score was a 2. So it was scored low. Then we have verification scoring after practice scoring, and you may choose again to have your scores for 5th grade use the verification sets to qualify for scoring student writing samples. The Best practice for qualifying, and again, this is specific to 5th grade. It's not a bad idea for teachers of any grade to use these resources and qualify and establish that they can apply a rubric in that manner, and it is required for the local high school performance assessment. But best practice for 5th grade discussion is that scores should have 70% or better exact agreement with the actual scores on each domain in one of the verification sets to qualify. And if scores having 10% or more non-adjacent scores in more than one domain should not qualify. Divisions might consider asking scores to qualify through Understand Scoring annually. Again, that is a choice for 5th grade and a requirement for local high school. But it's very important to point out that even after qualifying, scores should continue to revisit the anchor sets and annotations, and along with any other resources available in Understand Scoring to recalibrate themselves, make sure they're still consistently applying that rubric. It is best practice that all papers for 5th grade are read by 2 readers, with the student score for each domain being the total of the score assigned by both readers. But divisions are the ones who should establish protocols for resolving non-adjacent scores. We do, however, recommend that a 3rd qualified scorer rescore the domain on which the scores are non-adjacent, and with the highest 2 of 3 scores accepted, because you will have that at times, and it's not a bad idea to have a 3rd party come in if you don't already have established that 3 scores will be used, bringing in someone else to resolve those scores. And if you choose to calculate a total score, composing written expression is counted twice and usage and mechanics is counted once. Another way of saying that is that composing written expression is 2/3 of the score and the usage mechanics score is 1/3. One thing we want to point out, and that's consistent with the SOL short paper component for all grade levels and for the local high school performance assessment, is that we don't consider individual student writing samples as passing or failing the local alternative assessment. And there's no numerical score that correlates to passing or failing score. So we consistently hear, consistently hear, well, a 2 fails the writing portion, and that is incorrect. Or a 3 passes the writing portion, and that's also not a correct conclusion. There's actually no numerical score. You will have to look at the rubric and evaluate what it's saying about what the student can do based on the score point. Division should develop a scoring protocol, and we recommend that you include in that protocol how to resolve those non-adjacent scores when scores are not agreeing, when and how often training and qualifying will occur in your division or schools, when and how often calibration of scores will occur, and what those activities might look like as well, and when and how often writing tasks will be scored using the grade 5 writing scoring rubrics. It's best practice to incorporate some quality control activities throughout the scoring window. That might look like having pre-scored papers and verifying that scores are assigning the appropriate score to those, or you may come up with a different protocol, and that's certainly okay. It's also best practice to train and qualify scores at a time near the scoring window, and it just makes sense, and it's not always possible to do it right the day of or the day before, but it is best practice to make sure that scores are trained and qualified as close as possible to when they're scoring, because again, as you go through scoring or as time goes by, you may need to recalibrate anyway. And also, it's best practice to include a way to requalify and or recalibrate scores immediately before scoring student samples or during an extended scoring window. And just make sure, again, that the rubric is being applied appropriately.
We wanted to share some additional uses for Understand Scoring. There are several ways that you can use Understand Scoring. We want it to be helpful for whatever your division may need. So information in Understand Scoring can be helpful to anyone producing, teaching, or scoring student writing. So one way you might use them is for professional development purposes, to help model for what teachers should be looking for in student writing. Another way to use it is with students, to kind of model providing what peer feedback might look like, and model self-assessing to share with students what they could be looking for in their own writing. And then thinking about using some of these anchor papers in the scoring process with some teachers who may not teach specifically the craft of writing, but who may teach another content such as history or science. So even though they are often having students write about their content to share their knowledge and to share with others, and often they are providing feedback on the content, they can always provide feedback on that writing as well if they feel comfortable and are trained properly in doing that. So another great way to kind of show consistency across your teachers in giving feedback to writing, but also might help them feel more comfortable in doing that. And then it's just a quick way to have access to Virginia-specific student samples. All of the samples in Understand Scoring were from students in Virginia in 5th grade. So it's a great way to kind of find those student samples that have feedback aligned with the 2017 standards of learning. And then we'll go to some more examples. So using the examples in annotation to help identify strengths and weaknesses in students' writing and share students how they can improve their own writing. So students, as educators, we always say students will learn more from us than learn more from each other than sometimes they will from us. And so I think using those student papers sometimes as those mentor texts, we use books as mentor text, and we use teachers models writing as mentor, but also using student writings as mentor. Maybe picking a specific section out that you wanted to share with students of a student writing. So really sharing those exemplars and sharing the kind of rubrics to show how the criteria kind of match with, and to help them improve their own writing is another great way to kind of use it instructionally with students, not only as a development for teachers. So just something to think about as you begin this process, or kind of continue the process of using Understand Scoring, hopefully in your division. So a little bit more about 5th grade writing, just a couple of resources to share. Last year in 2019, at our Deeper Learning Conference, we did have a session on 3rd through 5th grade writing. It was really instruction that kind of leads to a performance assessment in writing. So it's moving in the right direction, and it's linked here for you in this presentation. But then also the grade 5 writing rubric is also linked here for you as well. So feel free to use either of those or access those. And then thinking about what has not changed. So just a couple notes as we begin to close out our afternoon. So what has not changed, specifically in grade 8 for this slide, but there have been no changes at this time to the grade 8 SOL test blueprint or test items. The grade 8 writing SOL continues to be required a Virginia assessment, and the grade 8 training materials remain available in Understand Scoring for Virginia educators. So feel free to go back and look at those. You would click on the 8th grade tab to find those. And then the grade 8 writing SOL test continues to be aligned with the 2010 English SOLs. And then what has not changed for end of course. So at this time, there have been no changes to the end of course writing SOL test blueprint or test items. Students can earn their verified credit in writing through the end of course writing test, the local high school performance assessment, or from one of the substitute tests. And that the end of course writing SOL test continues to be an available Virginia assessment, and the end of course writing training materials also remain on Understand Scoring website for Virginia educators. And that the end of course writing SOL tests along with the 8th grade writing SOL tests continue to be aligned with the 2010 English Standards of Learning. And then on the next slide, we've linked some resources that may be helpful for you as well. Sometimes it's nice to have them on a slide when you're thinking back to a webinar you attended instead of having to go digging for them. So we've linked those here for you. The Virginia Standards of Learning testing website and the comprehensive literacy instructional plans. There are several plans there specific to writing instruction, but also showing how to integrate all of the strands of English into writing instruction. So take a look at those. And then performance assessments and the local alternative assessment page there as well. And so now I believe Jill is going to close us out and share a little bit about what is coming next.
Thank you, Carmen. So yes, we are so close to having support information ready and available for any school division who is interested in using the local performance assessments to verify credits in writing for high school, in having support material and anchor sets and annotations ready that show using the performance level descriptors that align with the 2017 standards of learning, so that school divisions can start using those to evaluate their collections of evidence, formerly known as the bodies of evidence, but now interchangeably known as the collections of evidence, used to award verified credit. So if your school division is exploring the option of using a local performance assessment for high school, I encourage you to keep an eye out in the next few weeks as we hopefully launch information with anchor sets and pretty much almost like a static version of Understand Scoring, but it's about collections of evidence and showing them against the 3 different performance level descriptors and showing you which collections of evidence in these samples would get a proficient, a basic, or an advanced. So that material is so close to being ready that I can almost taste it, and you will hear from us soon. And obviously we will be supporting that with another webinar specific to using collections of evidence and evaluating those against the performance level descriptor. So please know we have not forgotten about that. It is coming. I know most of you have decided to use the writing SOL test this year, but are still in the works of collecting samples and are thinking more long-term in those collections of evidence. So I encourage you to keep an eye out for that. Obviously, you will hear from me when that information is ready, and we will have support materials and webinars around that. So just know it is coming very, very soon. This is our contact information, but before we go, I just wanted to say very quickly, I know I talked a lot about this with my high school friends here, but in speaking now through the lens of 5th grade, I just wanted to reiterate when we're talking about the difference between grading and scoring, I also need to bring to your attention that we really do have 2 different rubrics posted. And the rubric that you all received a couple of years ago in 2018 that looks like what a teacher would consider to be a rubric that has all of the pieces of the domain, and it looks like a chart, and you can get really nitty gritty in scoring your students and basically grading them and providing feedback to those students. Those are phenomenal instructional rubrics, and I encourage you to use them as your students are writing in the classroom, and they could be used in any classroom where students are writing. Those are phenomenal for feedback. Those help and show exactly where maybe they need to improve their conclusion, or maybe they need to work on their expression, whatever the case may be. Those standardized rubrics really kind of focus in and hone in on those skills. The holistic scoring rubric that is available in Understand Scoring and is also aligned to the 2017 standards, really just shows us all of the attributes and features of a paper that receives a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. So it does not get down into the nitty-gritty of telling students that they, need to work on their transition words, or that they need to explain and expand upon some of their thoughts and give more details in their paragraphs. So we use the 2 pieces and the 2 rubrics for completely different purposes. That instructional rubric where we really want to share feedback with students, or maybe with their parents in a conference or a writer's conference, that is something that we use for grading to give that feedback. The scoring rubric is used to give a holistic picture of just how a student did on this writing sample, whether they got a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. And when you look at that bulleted example, you will see that it does not get into all of the nitty-gritty details. It just says, you know, covers the overall features within this domain and lists a few things. So again, one is used for scoring and one is used instructionally and for grading. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that for anybody who's still listening with us this afternoon. And if you go to that performance assessment and local alternative assessment page, you will see both of them listed with their explanations. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there because I think many of you are familiar with the instructional rubric, but the holistic scoring rubric serves a different purpose. And you'll see when you go through the anchor papers in Understand Scoring, why it serves a different purpose and how you could use that to score. And scoring can be a lot faster than grading. So it might be an interesting opportunity for you to kind of look at through some of your student samples now, just to see where they might fall. It's a great practice for anyone. So again, this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. And as I stated earlier, this has been recorded and we will be posting it on the website along with the PowerPoint. So you do have this. You could share it in a grade level meeting, during a faculty meeting, during a professional learning day, whatever the case may be. The material will all be there. And again, while this was through the lens of 5th grade, there are opportunities to use this with middle and high school teachers as they consider how they might use Understand Scoring in their practice as well. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that if you haven't already registered for one of our upcoming reading assessment webinars, that you do so soon. We completed our 3rd grade webinar yesterday. We have 4th and 5th grade tomorrow and Friday, and we'll be hitting all of secondary Monday through Thursday next week. So if you want to reach out to us for the link for that, feel free. It's all over Virginia Department of Ed social media. It's on my Twitter, their Twitter, everybody's Twitter. It's also found on our website. So if you email us, if you're interested in hearing about instruction aligned to the 2017 Standards of Learning to match with the new SOL reading tests that we anticipate giving in spring of 2021, please make sure that you join us this week and next week. And again, if you can't join us, all of those materials will be recorded and posted on our website for future use. But thank you for sharing your time with us this afternoon, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.